Marcus Ellington was 39 years old, and for 11 years he had driven a dented gray Silverado with a crack in the passenger side mirror and a pine air freshener that had long since stopped smelling like anything. He wore work boots to church and kept his phone in a belt clip. Vanessa's friends from the firm called him Truck Marcus behind her back, and when she found out, she said she'd corrected them. She hadn't. He drove that Silverado to Charlotte Douglas International on a Thursday afternoon in late October, parked in short term, and walked to the arrivals terminal with a cup of gas station coffee and a sign he'd written in marker on a piece of cardboard that said, "Wife." He was still smiling when he saw her come through the glass doors. She was laughing at something on her phone. Renato walking 3 steps behind her with both their carry-ons, and she did not see Marcus until he said her name. The smile she gave him then was the right shape, but something behind the eyes was calculating, calibrating, measuring, he noticed. He had always been very good at noticing. He kissed her cheek and took both bags from Renata, and while he loaded them into the truck bed, he heard Vanessa tell Renata in a low voice, "He actually drove that thing. I swear to God. He doesn't know what he owns. He doesn't know anything." Then she laughed again. Renata said something back that he didn't catch. There was $4.1 million in a trust account that bore his mother's maiden name. Vanessa had spent 6 months trying to find his money, and she had not found the beginning of it. What happened next would cost her everything she thought she had coming. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from, and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The morning before the airport run, Marcus had been in the workshop behind the house at 6:15, sanding the top of a dining table he'd been building from a single slab of black walnut his Uncle Leon had milled out in Asheboro 12 years prior. The slab had been waiting. Most things worth having were. He worked with the grain, his hands reading the wood the way a physician's hands read a patient, slow and certain, and the early light came through the workshop window in one long gold column that landed on the curled shavings on the floor. He kept the shop cold enough that his breath showed. He liked it that way. His mother, Cecilia, had told him once. He was maybe 9 years old, standing at a workbench that came to his chin, she had said. The thing about building something with your hands is that it can't lie to you. You either did the work or you didn't. He had not understood it then. He understood it now with a kind of comprehension that came from having lived the opposite, from having watched the things you didn't build with your hands turn out to be built on nothing at all. Cecilia had passed 4 years ago. Pancreatic cancer, fast and total. She had left him the house in Greer Heights, a neighborhood that Charlotte had been trying to gentrify for a decade. And she had left him the knowledge that all the things she'd set aside for him, carefully, over 40 years of double shifts and quiet investment, were his and his alone. She had not liked Vanessa. She had never said so directly. She had simply stopped asking about her after the 2nd year of marriage and redirected her questions to Marcus's work, his health, his plans. He had met Vanessa at a regulatory conference in Raleigh. She had been presenting on municipal contract compliance, confident at the podium in a gray blazer, sharp with her numbers, and he had been in the 3rd row because his firm was bidding on the same pipeline project the conference was built around. She had come to him at the coffee station afterward and opened with a direct question about load calculations, and he had answered it in full. And she had looked at him differently after that, like he had surprised her, like she had filed him under one category and now had to revise. He had liked that look then. He had confused it for respect. They had dated for 2 years and married on a Saturday afternoon in October, a small ceremony in his mother's backyard, sweet potato pie instead of wedding cake, because Cecilia had insisted. He remembered Vanessa laughing that day in a way he had not seen much in the years since, open and unguarded, a real thing. He did not know when the real thing had stopped. He knew only that it had. The first signal had not been the airport. The first signal had been 3 weeks earlier, a Friday night. Vanessa in the kitchen on a video call, she ended the moment she heard his truck in the driveway. She had been perfectly composed when he came through the door, but she had left her laptop at the kitchen table, and when he set his bag down beside it, he caught half a sentence frozen on the screen before it went dark. Because by the time he finds out, the transfer will already. He had said nothing. He had opened the refrigerator and asked what she felt like for dinner. He had been watching ever since. He did not hear the second half of what Vanessa said to Renata in the arrivals lane. But he did not need to. He had learned a long time ago, in the year after his mother died, when grief had sharpened his observational capacity to something close to surgical, that people told you everything you needed to know if you stayed quiet long enough. She had said he doesn't know what he owns. She had said he doesn't know anything. He drove home on I-85 while Vanessa talked about the conference in Savannah she'd been at for 4 days, a real estate law symposium she attended every fall. She described a dinner she'd had with colleagues. She described the weather. She asked him nothing about his week. He nodded and said sounds good at the right intervals and looked straight ahead at the highway. He dropped her at the house and said he had to go back to the firm to sign off on some drawings. She did not question it. He drove 6 minutes to a CV's parking lot and sat. His hands did not shake. He opened his personal phone, not the work phone, not the one Vanessa had the number to, and pulled up the secure folder where he had been keeping records for 3 weeks. A screenshot of the kitchen laptop screen, taken with the phone through the glass of the kitchen window before she'd killed the display. A February bank statement from their joint account showing $12,000 moved to a savings account in Vanessa's name alone. A savings account he'd only discovered existed when he'd gone to refinance the Greer Heights property, and the underwriter had found it in her financial disclosure. A text from his financial advisor, Perry, flagging an inquiry that had been made on one of his LLCs. Someone had pulled the registered agent records. The inquiry was linked to a law firm based in Atlanta. He'd looked up the firm. They specialized in asset division. He sat with those 3 things for a long time. Then he pulled the thread. He requested full statements on the joint account going back 30 months. He requested the filing history on both vehicles, both properties. He called Perry at 8:30 that night, and Perry, who had managed Marcus's finances since before Vanessa existed, pulled everything he needed without asking a single unnecessary question. By midnight, Marcus had a timeline. By 1 in the morning, he had a pattern. Vanessa had been moving money since the previous January, 10 months. Small amounts at first. $800 here, $1,500 there, always from shared accounts, and always described in the memo line as household, or medical, or car service. The amounts had escalated in the late summer. August alone, $14,000. September, $18,500. The joint account had held $67,000 at the start of the year. It held $11,200 now. He had not noticed because the joint account was not where Marcus kept his attention or his money. It was a convenience account. Her salary went in, shared expenses went out. The real architecture of his finances sat elsewhere, in LLCs and trusts and managed portfolios that had Cecilia's fingerprints all over their structure and her maiden name on the documents. Vanessa had found the surface. She had taken the surface money, and she had clearly believed that was the whole of it. His face remained perfectly calm. He opened a new folder on his laptop. He named it Cecilia, after his mother, which felt right. He moved everything into it. Then he made one phone call. "Go ahead and pull everything on that Atlanta firm," he said quietly. "And Patricia, I need to see you Monday." Patricia Odom had a fourth-floor office in a building on South Tryon that overlooked a parking deck. She kept real orchids on the windowsill and a credenza behind her desk that held, as far as Marcus could tell, every document she had ever been handed in 32 years of family law practice. She had done the estate work when Cecilia died. She had reviewed the prenuptial agreement Marcus had drafted before the wedding, the one Vanessa had signed in what Vanessa had described to her friends as a quick formality. Patricia knew what was in that agreement in the way a surgeon knows an anatomy text. Cold, precise, by location. She reviewed what Marcus laid on her desk, the bank statements, the transfer records, the screenshot, the inquiry on the LLC, and she read, without commenting. When she finished, she folded her hands and looked at him directly. "She has no idea what she signed," Patricia said. "That prenup doesn't just protect your premarital assets, it contains a bad faith clause. Fraudulent dissipation of marital funds voids her claims to anything accrued during the marriage as well. She has handed us the mechanism of her own outcome." "I understand," Marcus said. "There's more," Patricia said. She turned her laptop so he could see the screen. Her associate had been working on the Atlanta firm all weekend. The firm had represented Vanessa in a previous matter, a civil case, 5 years before she met Marcus, in which a former business partner had alleged that Vanessa had redirected shared corporate funds into a personal account. The case had settled, the terms were sealed. But the existence of the case was public record, and the pattern it described was not difficult to read alongside what he had just put on Patricia's desk. "This is not the first time," Patricia said. Marcus looked at the screen for a long moment. "No," he said. "I don't imagine it is." He drove to his Uncle Leon's house in Kannapolis that Tuesday. Leon was 71, retired from the furniture plant, and he kept chickens in his backyard and a pot of something on the stove at all hours. He poured Marcus a cup of black coffee and sat across from him at the kitchen table and listened without interruption to everything Marcus said. When Marcus finished, Leon was quiet for a moment. "You know what your mama always said about foundation work?" Leon said finally. "Tell me." "She said the ground will show you every lie a man ever told about what he built. You can paint the walls. You can roof the thing. But eventually, you're going to stand on the floor. And the floor don't lie." He picked up his cup. "Same thing here." The floor don't lie. Marcus drank his coffee and thought about that. It was Leon who told him the other piece. The thing Marcus had not known and would not have found on his own. Leon had run into Vanessa's mother, Darlene, at a church function the previous spring. Darlene had said something that had not meant much to Leon in the moment, but meant everything now. That Vanessa had a man in Atlanta she called her financial advisor, a man named Craig Dupree, who had apparently been involved in that sealed civil case as well. Dupree had relocated to Atlanta from Charlotte in 2019. Dupree drove a black Range Rover. Dupree had, according to Darlene, who had no idea what she was disclosing, been to Charlotte twice in October, while Vanessa was supposedly in Savannah. Marcus thanked his uncle and drove home. On the way, he called Perry. "I need everything you can find on a Craig Dupree, Atlanta financial services background." Perry called back before Marcus reached the city limits. "This one's not subtle," Perry said. 2 disciplinary actions with FINRA. 1 fraud investigation, dropped for lack of witness cooperation. He's been operating under a consulting umbrella since 2021 because he can't hold a license. In Savannah? She was registered for the conference, Perry said. Checked in at the hotel. but the conference app shows her badge wasn't scanned after Wednesday morning. Dupree's card was used at a restaurant in Savannah on Wednesday night. Table for two. Thank you, Perry. Marcus. A pause. I've known you since you were 26 years old and you couldn't afford a good suit. Whatever you're about to do it right. I always do, Marcus said. That Friday evening, Marcus made dinner. Salmon, roasted potatoes, the good olive oil. He set the table. He poured 2 glasses of wine. Vanessa came down from the bedroom in a robe, with her hair wrapped, and sat across from him, and talked about a colleague's promotion, and a show she was watching, and a trip she was thinking about taking to Sedona in the spring. He listened. He asked one question about the show to keep her talking. He ate. When she went back upstairs, he sat at the cleared table for a few minutes in the quiet, and thought about his mother's voice, and what the floor had to say. Real power operated in quiet rooms. The reckoning happened on a Tuesday morning in Patricia's conference room on the 4th floor of the South Tryon building. Marcus had asked Vanessa to come in for what he described as a routine meeting with their estate attorney to update some beneficiary designations. He had said it casually, over breakfast, in the same tone he used to mention that the dishwasher needed salt. She had agreed without asking follow-up questions. She arrived in a charcoal blazer and heels. She was composed, bright, already performing the version of herself she deployed for professional settings. She opened the conference room door and found Patricia at the head of the table. Patricia's associate to her left, Marcus's uncle Leon seated against the wall with a cup of coffee, and Marcus at the near end of the table in a chair turned slightly toward the door, as if he had been waiting for exactly this entrance. She also found, seated to Patricia's right, a woman named Gail Whitmore, a forensic accountant whose name appeared nowhere in anything Vanessa had researched, and a representative from the Mecklenburg County District Attorney's Economic Crimes Unit, who was there as an observer, and who had, in Patricia's words, found the timeline of events instructive. Vanessa stood in the doorway for 3 seconds before she sat. Patricia placed a bound document in front of her. Then another. Then a third. She narrated calmly. The first document was the complete bank transfer record, every dollar moved from joint accounts over the previous 10 months, totaling $47,800. Annotated with the memos Vanessa had used, and the dates they corresponded to events Marcus could document, were false. The second document was the prenuptial agreement, flagged at the bad faith clause, with a legal analysis by Patricia's associate that ran 6 pages. The third document was Gail Whitmore's forensic summary, a financial map that showed the movement of funds from the joint account into Vanessa's personal account, and from there, in portions, into an account held in Craig Dupree's Consulting, LLC. Vanessa looked at the documents. She looked at Marcus. He was watching her with an expression that was entirely without heat. Patient, observational. The way he watched weather from the workshop window. "This is a misunderstanding," she said. Her voice was even. She had been preparing something. Those transfers were for household management. "I can provide receipts. There are no receipts," Gail Whitmore said, "because the expenditures don't correspond to any household expense categories in your shared financial record. The funds went to Craig Dupree's business account. We have the wire confirmations." The composure began its retreat. It moved back slowly, like a tide. "Dupree has a separate matter," Patricia said, "that we've referred to appropriate parties. He's not your concern today. Today is about the prenuptial agreement you signed in February of 2015, which, as you will see on page 7, paragraph 4, specifically anticipates exactly what the financial record in front of you describes." Vanessa's voice shifted register. She looked at him directly, and her eyes did what he had seen them do in moments when she needed something. They softened. went searching for something to hold. "We can talk about this. Whatever you think happened, he knows what happened," Leon said from his chair against the wall. He said it quietly, without drama, the way he said most things. "And so do you." Vanessa turned to Leon, and then back to Marcus, and whatever script she had been running went somewhere it could not be retrieved from. Her mother, Darlene, had called her the previous Sunday, upset, confused, saying she'd heard something from a church friend about questions being asked around town. Vanessa had assured her there was nothing to worry about. She had believed that. She had believed she was ahead of this. She had believed Marcus was still in the dark, still eating his dinner and going to his job and driving his truck and existing inside the small frame she had built for him in her mind. The Dawes representative had not moved from his chair. He did not need to. His presence was the point. "The prenuptial agreement," Patricia said, "in combination with the documented fraudulent dissipation, leaves you with the following." She slid a fourth document across the table, a one-page summary. "Your premarital assets. Your vehicle, which is in your name alone. Your personal savings from before the marriage, minus the amount of the bad faith adjustment, which returns $47,800 to the marital estate with interest. The Greer Heights property, which predates the marriage and is held in trust, is not part of this proceeding." "What trust?" Vanessa said. "The Cecilia Marie Ellington Trust," Patricia said. "Established 2004. Marcus has been the primary beneficiary since his mother's passing in 2020. The trust holds interests in 4 LLCs, 2 real estate portfolios, and a managed investment account. None of it appeared in the marital asset disclosure because none of it was ever a marital asset." She paused. "You were looking in the wrong place, Miss Ellington." The room was very quiet. Marcus stood. He straightened his jacket. He had worn a jacket today. One Leon had told him looked like a man who knew what he was about. He picked up his copy of the documents, squared them against the table, and slid them into a leather portfolio his mother had given him for his 35th birthday. "I'm not angry," he said. He looked at Vanessa steadily, and his voice carried the same tone it carried when he was describing load-bearing specifications to a junior engineer, clear, final, concerned with accuracy above all else. "I'm clear. Those are different things." He walked to the door. Leon rose and followed. Patricia remained at the table with her associate and Gail Whitmore and the representative from the Dawes office, and behind Marcus as the door closed, the room was silent in a way that had weight to it. 7 months had passed like water since that morning. Marcus's workshop ran from 6 until 8 most mornings now, before the day's work began. The black walnut table was finished, 8 feet long, oiled to a dark warmth, with a slight natural bow in one corner that he'd kept because perfection in wood was a kind of lie. He'd set it in the dining room of the renovated Greer Heights house, the one his mother had left him, which he'd spent the winter reflooring in wide plank white oak, replastering 3 rooms, and opening a wall between the kitchen and the back porch to let the morning in. The Japanese maple he'd planted in the side yard in February was leafing out now, small and certain, committed to its own growth. He had a new firm email signature. It read, Marcus Ellington, P.E., Principal, Ellington Infrastructure Group. The group had signed its first municipal contract in April, a stormwater infrastructure project in Columbia, South Carolina, worth $2.3 million. Perry had called to congratulate him, and Marcus had thanked him and gone back to his drawings. He had met Diana at a fun dinner for a mentorship program he'd started supporting in his mother's name. STEM scholarships for young men in Greer Heights and the surrounding neighborhoods. Diana taught structural engineering at UNC Charlotte. She had asked him a pointed question about load distribution in soil-stabilized foundations, and he had answered it fully. And she had looked at him the way people looked when they encountered competence they had not anticipated. He liked that look. Still, he was learning to trust it again, slowly, which was fine. Slow work was often the most sound. He heard through Perry, who heard through a mutual contact, that Vanessa had left the firm she'd been at. There had been questions raised by a client about billing irregularities, a different matter entirely, pre-dating Marcus, but now very much on the record. She was doing consulting work. Darlene, her mother, had not spoken to her since April. Craig Dupree had relocated. The Dawes review remained ongoing. Marcus registered all of this the way he registered weather. Something to note, not something to carry. On a Saturday morning in late May, he was in the workshop before the sun was fully up, pressing a new set of seedlings into small pots, tomatoes his mother had grown every summer, a variety called Cherokee Purple that she'd saved seeds from for decades. The plants were thin and new and entirely committed to becoming something. He set each one in its pot carefully, firmed the soil with his thumbs, set them in a line on the shelf below the workshop window where the light would find them. Diana appeared in the doorway with 2 cups of coffee, her hair unfinished, wearing his gray sweatshirt. She looked at the seedlings. "Will they make it?" she asked. He looked at the pots. He thought about his mother's hands, which had always known what to do with good soil. "Yeah," he said. "If you do the work." He took the coffee, and they stood in the cold morning light, looking out at the yard he had made his own, and the maple at the edge of the property pressing green into the air with the steady patience of a thing that had always known what it intended to become. He was free. He was solvent. He was unbothered. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.